Hello once again. Welcome back to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botza. It gives me more than great pleasure to welcome back a regular guest and dear friend of our show, Mr. Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey is a writer, a broadcaster, an investor. He's also someone who now discloses himself as a conspiracy analyst, which we take our hat off to. He's also a great fan and advocate of many of the political greats, and Lord Salisbury is a man after our own heart. And look, a fantastic guy. Great to have him back on the show. We always leave the links to his fantastic work and his excellent website on investments, especially, and also medical. Everything's on there. But without further ado, can I just say, Godfrey, how are you, sir?
I'm extremely well. Thank you very much. And a great pleasure to be back on your show.
Oh, Godfrey, you've come back at an incredible time, and we're very fortunate to have you at this inflection point, we think, in British political history, where we have the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, scuttling around looking for excuses, whether those excuses be in the interest of national security. He didn't tell me, a liar didn't tell me he was lying. With Peter Mandelson and the whole scandal that's coming out about Peter Mandelson and the giving away of trade national secrets to convicted paedophiles, the revelation today is from the House of Commons, just hot off the press, that Prime Minister Starmer has admitted that he knew that Mandelson was still in touch with the then, before he died, of course, paedophile Godfrey Epstein. But he said he asked Mandelson about these accusations, and he believed Mandelson that he didn't have any more contact with him. This is quite extraordinary. What's your take on this whole Mandelson-Epstein-Starmer scandal?
Well, it's a rather unusual situation. It's rather odd, isn't it? I mean, I think it was very common knowledge that Peter Mandelson was a sexual deviant. It was very well known. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a secret. There are pictures of him in his leather gear in Brazil, in public knowledge, and everybody knew. But of course, what also everybody knew as well was he was a political manipulator, which was largely done via blackmail. And he had knowledge of people, which I suppose is what the traditional role of the chief whip used to be. You had the dirty on your backbenchers to stop them rebelling, and that's as old as time itself. Now, what is fascinating, really, is that we do seem to see that politics seems to attract more than its fair share of sexual deviants. And consequently, they are more subject to blackmail than ever before. But I was at school in the 1960s, and I proposed the motion that they should decriminalize homosexuality because it was a tool for blackmail. And as a libertarian, what anybody did in the privacy of their own homes was their own business and nobody else's. But of course, you're totally different when you start involving children in this. The libertarian argument no longer applies because it is a responsibility of every adult, every thinking, every right-minded adult to protect their children. And at the base of this, of course, is all sorts of weird activity, which goes very much deeper and wider than even you and I might have imagined. So it was sort of something that we always knew about. And you can go back to Gordon Brown. If you go back to Gordon Brown's premiership, why did he bring Mandelson back in when Mandelson was very well known to be what he actually is? So this sort of run around now by mainstream media pretending, oh my goodness me, look at this is all new, is absolute nonsense. We've all known about this for over 25 years. And now, of course, it's so in the open, it's so upfront that, of course, he's had to get out of the House of Lords and all sorts of other things. But the idea that this is somehow new and somehow revolutionary is absolute nonsense. We also know, do we not, that there are thousands of others who are in that kind of net. There's thousands, it seems to me, of weirdos in politics across the Western Hemisphere. And this is deeply upsetting and degrading for us as a nation and for other nations who are involved in this, the United States. I don't quite know where we can go from here, other than put these people, they can be proven to be paedophiles, which is illegal, to be put in prison.
Absolutely. And this VIP homosexual network, if we can just put it in those terms, we can even look at the Cambridge Five, where maybe people are talking about Profumo. I would say with the traits and proclivities of the characters involved, it would be more like the Cambridge Five, where 3 out of the 5 traitors to our country were homosexual. And a lot of reason that, to just expand on your point a little bit, and neither of us are homophobic. We don't care what people do in the privacy of their own homes, Christianity notwithstanding. There does seem to be this very homosexual element that they're very tainted individuals that are up for blackmail, and they are compromised to a very great extent. Now, we also have to look at Lord Ali in all of this, because Mandelson's connections with Starmer go back to his time at London Weekend Television before he went on to Carlton Television. And at Carlton Television, the owner of Planet 24, which is Lord Ali is one of the major funders of Keir Starmer, was also a friend of David Cameron, when David Cameron was at Carlton Television. So you're quite correct to say that this web goes out into the civil service. It goes out into television, Metropolitan Police, the judiciary. People are now scrambling around, Godfrey, to try to find out where we actually get these people in the dock. Where do they actually go, in your opinion, to try and get some justice to be served on behalf of the British people?
Well, it's extremely difficult because the Crown Prosecution Service is a political organisation. The police have been politicised. So once you have the civil service, the Crown Prosecution Service and the police all pissing in the same pot, it's very difficult for the ordinary person. I mean, we've seen this, have we not, with the inquiry into the rape gangs, which was well known. The police were involved in it. The police were involved in the cover-up. The Crown Prosecution Service, the political dynamic was covering it up, particularly with the Labour Party, who had very significant numbers of councillors and MPs involved in all this. So where do you go to actually get any form of justice? And the answer is, I'm afraid, I don't bloody know. I would argue, it's my view, and I'm coming to this slowly but surely over the last few years, I don't think there's a political exit route. I just don't think that that's possible. We're talking about, should we vote for him? Should we vote for them? Is this a new party in town? I don't believe any of this is relevant. I think we've gone past that, sadly. We've gone past the democratic situation that would normally have put this right, and an independent judiciary. The Fabians are taking over the Crown Courts and the courts and the Supreme Court, so on and so forth. Not to 100%, but enough now so that they can be manipulated. So self-censorship is now right. You have to censor yourself. You have to put all sorts of caveats in and be very careful, because you might find yourself in front of a Fabian judge who's going to bang chaps like us up immediately, especially if there's no jury, which is what they're trying to put forward. I mean, we go straight to jail, we don't pass go, and we don't collect £200. All these sort of things that are happening. And so I don't believe that very much can be done about it by the traditional method. I know, and I'm an old man now, I'm nearer 80 than 70. I know there's always been, since the history, in the history of time, that there has been some form of sexual deviancy going on all the time. But what we haven't been used to, since perhaps one argued Greek or Roman times, that it's on the scale that it is. It's on the scale. You're almost scratching your head sometimes to find out who isn't a deviant in some form, in a position of power. And of course, another thing which is very interesting, and this is why many years ago, I think it was 1998, 99, well before I went into politics, I was making an argument that you had to be very careful about legalizing any form of deviancy in the armed forces. Now, as a libertarian, I was quite happy to leave other people alone if you work in a bank, or you work in theatre, or you work in these things. I'm happy to leave that alone, really, because it's nothing to do with me. But when it came to the army, you have people in position of complete authority, whether they're NCOs or officers, of sometimes very young soldiers. And of course, we saw at Deep Cup those very young women who they said committed suicide, which we all know is complete nonsense. These are the sort of problems that you have. So it's very difficult to have people in positions of authority who are deviants. You have to clear them out because they can abuse that position. And that's something that I've always found extremely concerning. And we're not even close to that now. We're not even close to uncovering any of this. So it runs so deep and so wide without some kind of serious revolution. I don't see that there's very much that we can do about it. And that, I think, is one of the most frightening things in my lifetime. I was born in 1949. I think that's one of the most serious phenomena in my lifetime.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I've researched a little bit more about the Fabians and who Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus was. And he was a deviant himself. He was the embodiment of people like Macron, Keir Starmer, Obama, all of these characters in history. And it's funny, you often say that none of the front bench of the shadow cabinet or the government have ever played rugby. They've never been in a first 15. But I'll guarantee you every man jack of them would like to be in the bathtub afterwards.
I think that's probably true.
That's the closest they would get to the rugby 15 is passing around the soap on a rope. But you're absolutely right. And you and I have had many discussions about this, about the whole party system, the political dynamic. You've got reform coming over the horizon. Not that we want to get off the Mandelson situation. You've got reform coming over the horizon. You've got Nigel Farage, your old colleague in the European Union. But if we can just say on the European Union, you were in you were in Brussels, in the belly of the beast, for about 10 years. And in that time, Peter Mandelson was the European Union Business Secretary, for the want of a better term. And over that time, you would have seen this man in action to a certain degree. What were your impressions of him in that 4-year period from 2004 to 2008 when he was the European Union Business Secretary?
Well, it was very interesting. He was a guest of the Parliament. He was a speaker at the Parliament. And of course, it was thrown open to questions. And I was on the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee at the time. And so I asked him some questions, which, as you can imagine, were fairly nuanced, fairly upfront, as I always do. And it was quite an interesting thing because he had this great reputation for having something on somebody everywhere in all political parties. And he rather ostentatiously took out his notebook and he looked up into the gallery where I was sitting at my seat. And he got out a pen rather ostentatiously in his notebook in order to write down my name, in order to send a message which frightened other MPs and MEPs, because, oh my goodness me, he's written, I don't want to be in his book because he might blackmail me. But of course, you couldn't get me. You couldn't blackmail me because I hadn't actually done anything. I didn't have my hand in the till. I wasn't a sexual deviant of any sort. I was just a guy from the rugby club who got elected. And I actually said to him from the chamber, I said, Commissioner, he was Commissioner, I think then. I said, now, Commissioner, you won't get me on that. Don't try and frighten me with your notebook because you won't find anything about me that you can use. I'm not like your colleagues in Westminster, all of whom are crooks and perverts and all the rest of it. So you can get your little book out as much as you like. It's not going to cut the mustard with me. So I'll be very obliged if you'd stop all that theatre and actually answer the questions, which, of course, he didn't do. It was before, sadly, it was before everything was recorded in the chamber. Now you can find anything recorded in the chamber. That was pre, I think, 2005, perhaps, or 2006, when that actually happened. I can't remember. But that was his modus operandi. That's what he used to do. Out came the notebook, a bit like Maggie Thatcher's handbag, only for a different reason. So, yeah, fascinating. And now he's banged to rights. Now, the question is another thing with these people who are the sociopathic deviants, which he clearly is. These people always bring down as many as they possibly can with them. Now, interestingly enough, and I don't know, but we know so many of them have a dodgy history. We know, well, it's more a question of what we don't know about Keir Starmer, but we know that he's not normal. His marriage isn't normal. You can go right back to Ted Heath. He wasn't normal. What was he getting up to on Morning Cloud? How on earth could he afford the most expensive sport the world's ever seen, ocean yacht racing? Son of a grocer. Who was paying him? Who was manipulating him? And so it goes on. And then, of course, you've got the most extraordinary situation with this Labour government, who are full of oddballs, because otherwise you wouldn't be a Labour MP unless you were an oddball. I mean, they're all oddballs, but the Labour Party MPs are particularly oddball. And the other thing that they seem to have in common is they all have this kind of sociopathic, flawed childhood in some way, which has grown up and made them hate this country. They hate the country. We actually have the most destructive front bench in the history of the country for the simple reason they hate us. They hate Middle England. They hate white people, although they are middle class, university educated themselves. This is a form of self-hatred which is manifested on the rest of us. They hate us all, and it's a rather weird kind of phenomenon. And I would argue that it's more prevalent in this administration than anything we've ever seen. They hate our history. They hate business. They hate absolutely everything, and that's a great shame, because I don't see how the country can move forward at all with people who actually don't like us in command.
Absolutely. And, touching on Mandelson, he was part of the Young Communist League. And one would argue, I certainly would, that he hasn't changed his political outlook, and he'd be perfect in Brussels because he'd be sitting with other people with exactly the same sexual proclivities and also political and social proclivities. Keir Starmer wrote for a Marxist-friendly magazine when he was at college and then latterly on to university. And they're all part of these chambers, Godfrey, that are very so-called human rights libertarian. I speak of the Hodge, Jones and Allen chambers that represent Extinction Rebellion. They are hunting down all of those people who are ready to speak out against the lockdowns. They're also ready to, put the boot on anybody like you and I. And Keir Starmer's going to the Metropolitan Police to ask them and Sadiq Khan to police Peter Mandelson. So justice is really out the window, as you correctly said. It is getting to the point where people say the ballot box doesn't work, the judiciary doesn't work, and the police are so heavily tainted and politicised, they're almost like a Stasi and to enforce these political views. So where does this come, and can reform, I know this is probably a useless question, but I'll put it to you, can reform do anything about this? Can Nigel and his MPs make any difference to the situation?
Well, of course, I've pondered it for over a year. And at the last general election, I came out semi-reluctantly to say that reform was the only game in town. And that was my point of view. Then he got rid of Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib, who were the intellectual, if you will, articulate intellectual pillars of the party, and went back to the reverted to the norm, which is the one-man band. And we both know that if you go back, if you do an audit trail politically of the reform leadership, it's about one person only. It's not about any form of serious reform. And we have seen now it develop into the people who he's drawing in from the Conservative Party. All the same people that we thought we'd seen the back of. Now, I wouldn't necessarily take too much issue with Suella Braverman, perhaps, but that other dude who was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Nadeem Zahawi.
Yeah, him, 5 minutes. What the hell's he doing, bro? He's actually exchanged that guy for Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
Which actually begs the question, it's not whether it's a political mistake, it actually begs the question, is he sound? Is he sound of mind? You know, that's the question. So not only are we not going to get any sort of serious reform, because he's already telegraphed that he's not going to do that, which is why he's being Robert Jenrick. What's he doing in reform? He was part and parcel of why we stopped voting Conservative. So, no, the whole thing is clearly a sham. It's an opportunity wasted. The political dynamic at the moment is an open goal. All you had to do is keep the bloody nose clean, reform, and get elected. But no, then people are coming up with these ridiculous ideas. It brings experience to reform. Well, now, here's a question I'd like to put to your listeners.
Yeah.
If you were recruiting, let's just keep it simple. Let's say you were recruiting a football team. You were putting together a football team. And if you were recruiting your players from a team which hadn't won a game for 2 years, would you say, we need him, he's a great centre forward and he's got so much experience? He hasn't been in a winning team now for years. Why would you do that? Isn't it better to have a clean sheet and say, well, he hasn't got any experience, but at least he's not one of life's losers? all we're getting is these cast-offs. And of course, now here's another problem that we've got. Ben Habib's been starting his own party, Advance UK, which has been doing very well recently when it comes to getting new people, so on and so forth. And he's set his stall out for it. And I did an interview with him on my channel last year. Very intelligent man. And it seems to me that he's a very principled man. And he's moving forward with Advance UK. And I like the way that that's going. But of course, like you, I'm outside party politics now. I have to be. Otherwise, I can't take objective views and do objective interviews. So I don't have anything to do with party politics. Plus the fact, because I promised my wife after UKIP that I'd never have anything to do with party politics again.
Quite right.
Because she was fed up drawing knives out of my shoulder blades. But leaving that aside, now then we have one of the most articulate and one of the most industrious MPs, Rupert Lowe. I come back to Rupert Lowe, who's now starting his own political party. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? And Ben Habib said, I don't need to be leader of Advance UK. I don't need to be leader. Rupert Lowe could be leader. He's already in situ, and that would make sense. I'm quite happy for the good of my country, but no. And everything you see Rupert Lowe do is sensible, articulate, and balanced. But they all seem to have this little thing in their head, don't they?
They do. They do.
What is it that you don't get, Rupert? Here's a ready-made party for you to take over. All right, you've been invited so to do. Ben Higgins said the door's open, but no. So you're going to split the vote again, and the vote carries on being split. Reform isn't the answer. Advance UK has a long way to go, given it has no political representation in Parliament. And there we are, a marriage made in heaven. But it's not going to happen. And I really want to corner some of these guys, say, what's your problem? What's your problem? You know, have you got a little tiny penis? Is that the problem? What is the problem?
Well, I would have to ask Mrs. Lowe for that that testimonial. But you're absolutely right. People on the right are so fractured, and it comes down to what ego, perhaps, control. They always have to be in control. They believe that if they're not the CEO, they're no one. And it's in some terms, it's quite selfish and unpatriotic I think Ben, it has to be said again, as you pointed out, that Ben has been ready to stand aside. And this is almost unknown in political history, that someone starts their own party, funds it, puts all their blood, sweat, and tears into it, as he did when Nigel vacated the battlefield, when Ben Habib was the deputy leader of Reform. There's Ben ready to stand aside and say, look, Rupert, I know you're in the House of Parliament. You're the voice that we need to spearhead this. Will you step into the breach? And he said no. He's not interested in any way whatsoever, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And I would love for you to get them both in a room and bang their bloody heads together, or just say you're not allowed out till Godders has been through you. Like shit through a goose, excuse my language. But again, the right are all bickering amongst themselves. I mean, we get a lot of people on our feed that when we read the comments, I'm sure you get this all the time. Any positive comment that you may have for Ben Habib or Rupert Lowe, it's you're attacked by these Reform Nigel addicts that can't seem to do balanced debate. They can't seem to actually see that the bigger picture is trying to get our national sovereignty back, something that you've fought for decades. And it is quite sad to see. So where do you see Ben going? Because right now they're not even polling in the Denton and Gorton by-election. And to be fair, it's a brand new party. They might be on 1-2%, but they'll be lucky to get their deposit back. They've got a candidate, Nick Buckley, who is, he's got his own platform. But it seems to be between Reform and the Greens. I'm more worried, Godfrey, that the Green Party, with all that they stand for, which is quite demonic and satanic, that they might actually be in a position to get a new MP. What are your thoughts on the Greens?
Well, it's difficult, really. The Green Party is so lunatic.
Yeah.
It's so lunatic. And how much greener can you get than net zero? We've got a nutcase, Ed Miliband, in the role at the moment, and people vote Green. All I can say is, why would anybody vote Green? It's ridiculous. It's not even tribal. It's just suicidal. I can't help thinking that maybe the country needs to go to the devil. Maybe this is what we deserve. If people are voting Green in any great numbers, maybe that's exactly what they bloody well deserve, and may the whole place burn down. I've got tons of tin food. We've got big gates on my small holding, and we're very well set for the country to go to the devil. So if it goes to the devil, I want to just be able to shout at Green, serves you right. Vote Labour, serves you bloody right. You get what you deserve. We can't all live on bloody welfare. We can't all go on living on welfare. We can't all go on saving the planet with fake science. That this ludicrous idea, which of course science is now beginning to perk up and say that they were too frightened to come out before, that this idea that man-made global warming, especially in the United Kingdom, if we drive SUVs and that aren't battery operated and all that kind of shit, we're all going to go to the devil, is scientifically ridiculous. I don't know what history will make of it. They will look back and say, you'll never believe, how could they put a man on the moon? How could they invent jet engines? How could they do these extraordinary advances in science and do the equivalent of actually dancing around a fire in a rain dance, half naked, waving clubs about, which is what they're doing? Doesn't make any sense. But of course, you and I both know who's making money. Everybody's making money out of it. A lot of people are making money. Who isn't making money? Medium and small-sized businesses are dying because we've got the most expensive electricity in the world. And our great-grandchildren will be going, what were they thinking? What is wrong with them? What were they up to? In much the same way we look back on witch burning now. We look back on witch burning and go, if you look at the manuscripts that they were doing, if you look at the plays that they could write, if you look at the artwork that they could do, they were burning witches. What kind of monster nutcases were they? And we will look back and say, what kind of nonsense monsters were these people? And at the moment, we are a very few, we're just a few of us. We are lone voices. And of course, when it all comes to the fore and people and the whole thing collapses, of course, everybody will have been in our corner. Oh, well, of course, I've been saying it for years. Scientists will say, oh, well, of course, I've been saying it for years. And it was like the euro and it was like money printing or modern monetary theory. You'll get your academics in Cambridge and say, well, of course, I've said this for years. No, you bloody well didn't. I was lecturing at Cambridge a couple of years ago and you weren't saying that. You were treating me like a pariah because I was telling you if you go on printing money, you'll get inflation and then a collapse of fiat currency. And I've been right in spades. And as my wife always says, the trouble is with you, Godfrey, you're always right, which is why you've got no mates.
Well, like I'd like to consider myself, even though we've not had a drink together yet, one of your mates and one of your fans, because you've got the balls and the brains, if you don't mind me saying, the combination of the two, and it's very, very dangerous to these people. We call them the unholy alliance. This is the alliance of the Islamic hordes that have been imported into our country with these Marxist communists disguised as libertarians. And more people are looking to Donald Trump, if I can just bring you onto this. Now, you've given a great balanced view on Donald Trump. The reason I'm bringing in Donald Trump, Godfrey, if you don't mind me saying, is that you're actually seeing deportations of a sort, even though they're less than President Obama did. But you're seeing someone who's trying to actively reindustrialize his country, bin the Paris Climate Accord, bin the World Health Organization, in fact, bin the United Nations, with a group of Marxists they are. He laughs and slaps the face of the International Court of Human Rights and Justice like they were a mere mustard burp after a meal down at Boysdale's. But look, what do you think of what Trump's doing? And what positives, first of all, do you like from this Trump administration? And then bring on your negatives, please, Godfrey.
Well, he's doing a lot of things which are domestically sound, which he said he would do. He's not doing nearly to the extent that he should be doing, but at least domestically on home policy, he's going in the right direction. He has absolutely no idea about foreign policy at all. I have a Jack Russell Terrier who knows more about foreign policy than he does. He hasn't the remotest idea. But then he doesn't have to have very much of an idea because United States foreign policy is run from Tel Aviv. That's, it's run by the Zionists. They run foreign policy, which of course is absurd. And this isn't an anti-Semitic thing.
No.
This is I am anti-Zionist. And a lot of my Jewish friends are the same. They say, they're mad out there in Tel Aviv. Netanyahu's mad. So we can't tar everybody with the same brush. But the problem is, of course, it's very difficult to actually split the two when there's an existential threat brought on themselves by Israel. So this fiasco, and if we'd spoken a month ago or 2 weeks ago, you'd have asked me, what do I make of the Armada going to Iran? And I would have explained to you what the strategic and the geopolitical military situation was. And yet again, I have been right. He said, talk about the Duke of York, marched him up to the top of the hill, and he marched him down again. He sent them all there. His aircraft carries his destroys his bits and pieces. And I said to anybody who's prepared to listen about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he doesn't understand that the modern weapon systems that the Iranians have, which are Russian and Chinese backed. The modern concept of operations, as we used to call it when I was in the army many years ago, you have a concept of operations, concept of ops. That's how it used to work. He obviously doesn't understand anything of that. And also, the people who get to the top, just like Great Britain, that get to the top of our military are placemen. So you have 4-star generals who are good little doggies and noddy dogs. They do what they say. So you have lunatic senators and congressmen, people like Lindsey Graham and so on, John Bolton, all these people are psychos who ought to be in a padded cell. These people are quite dreadful. To have a war with Iran, which of course everybody can go Iran or no, I don't know a single bloody American blue collar who has a clue where Iran is. Even if you translated it back into what its real term is, Persia. Persia, a 5,000-year-old empire. The idea that these people are running around with a bone through their nose and a club or a bow and arrow, long gone. And of course, they've had to stop making themselves look fools. And then, of course, the only get out that Trump had was, they've promised that they don't have any bad intentions against anybody else. So we'll sail all the way back again. And of course, the Israelis are going, oh, no, we don't want a war yet because our air defense systems aren't there. And the last war, 12-day war they had, the Israelis were screaming for mercy. Screaming for mercy. We've got to stop the war. And the Iranians this time have said this: we are not prepared to go on like this, where you jab us and throw things at us and all the rest of that. And if you do it once more, it's once too often, and we're going to retaliate big time. And the first thing they're going to do, they're going to obliterate Tel Aviv. Who could blame them? Now, what we need to do is to bring peace back to the Middle East. Goodness knows it's fractured enough in the Middle East historically. What good is war? And I've made this point, and I think it used to be on my sort of clip thing. I'm a peacenik now, an ex-military man who is peacenik. War doesn't benefit anybody, hardly ever, and hasn't done really in modern history. Wars are a complete waste of blood and treasure. It's not worth doing, and we don't seem to learn anything. And of course, it's as old as time itself. Who sends young men to war? Old men sitting in their clubs. And it was ever thus. Moving glasses and ashtrays around to give a dynamic strategic view of which they know nothing whatsoever. I spent a year with the Royal College of Defence studying strategy. I doubt there's a single politician in the House, there is one actually, who's done the RCDS course, who's been deliberately kept out of any form of office. So he knows about these things. And we now have, this is something that is worth bearing in mind by your listeners. If you are what the Americans call a 4-star general, so if you're a very senior general, let's just say very senior general, you will have had no experience at all of operating or commanding any structure above divisional level in exercise. The last two, I think I'm right in saying, 1981, 1982, Exercise Crusader and Exercise Lionheart. That was the last core exercise we ever had, which is all arms logistical support. All right? Yeah. That's like 45 years ago. So there's not a single general who knows, has even practiced how to do it. And here we have over in the Russian camp, 1.5 million soldiers with combat experience. And any of your ex-soldiers watching this will know the difference between soldiers with combat experience and without combat experience is enormous. As the Americans found out of the Kesselring Pass in North Africa in 1944, they landed to fight. They were going to do great deeds when they landed on Operation Torch in North Africa. They're going to do great deeds, and they had much more equipment and bits and pieces than the Africa Corps, which was almost fought to a standstill by the British 8th Army. And they turned around and they gave the Americans a very bloody nose indeed, because they were combat trained and combat experienced. We have integrated war systems now with drones and all sorts of different styles of advancing and so on and so forth. Very complicated. I could give a long lecture on it, actually, and I don't even consider myself to be an expert. So we can't fight the Russians, and yet we still have. Who's that funny fellow, Rory? Somebody who looks a bit like a gargoyle.
Rory Stewart.
Rory Stewart. I think it was a sort of platoon commander years ago. Doesn't know shit from play, suggesting that we need to ramp up our opposition to. How can you know so little? How can you be that wrong? How can you be that wrong about everything he opens his mouth about? And then we've also got senior Air Force officers, haven't we, talking rubbish and saying we've got to start recruiting and we need more this, more that. The Royal Air Force has spent the last 10 years actually with diversity recruitment. Yeah. So consequently, we now haven't got enough people to train our own pilots to fly our own planes. They're coming from India. You couldn't invent all this bloody nonsense. And of course, mainstream media don't know how to interview people about the military, because there's not a single interviewer on mainstream media, or sadly now in the press. Do you remember the days when the Daily Telegraph used to have top like John Keegan, my old mentor at Sandhurst?
Yes.
These people really, and Claire Hollingworth, all these people really knew their stuff. Now they don't have anybody who knows what question to ask. They don't know the question to ask. Never mind how to interpret an answer. We are not a military power. We're not even close to being a military power. No one in Western Europe is close to being a military power. I think the Americans are a busted flush. Why don't we therefore go back to diplomacy and trying to calm things down a little bit? I mean, instead of this constant idea that somehow the British Empire still exists, the Americans are still where they were in 1946, the Soviet Union is still there, been gone for 20 years. Why can't we face reality? I know it's money, I know it's the industrial military complex,
Yeah.
and it's people again who are socially somehow inadequate. Don't tell me when I look at Rory Stewart, he's not somehow in some way inadequate as an individual.
Well, he's in good company because he does a podcast with Alistair Campbell, the war criminal himself. And in Scotland, we're always wary of the Campbells from Argyll. After Culloden. We haven't forgot about Culloden, by the way, Godfrey. But as you... No, we don't, lest we forget. And as you correctly said, you go back to your comments on the Zionists. It's got to be because of the endless war to make money. Blood sacrifice means absolutely nothing or everything. As some people suggest that they actually get off on this, that there's some demonic kick, that we won't go down that rabbit hole, that sort of Babylonian rabbit hole today, but it certainly does exist.
Well, you get people. I mean, David Cameron was on air, I think it was 2 years ago, and it was quite, and he's not alone in very senior British politicians saying, I'm a Zionist.
Yeah.
Well, just a minute.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're a Zionist? Zionism doesn't include you.
Yeah.
Mr. Cameron, it doesn't include you. It's about you not being Zionist. Yeah. And you're a natural enemy of Zionists because they believe, rightly or wrongly, who knows? They might be right. One day we might find out that they are God's chosen people. Now, it doesn't matter whether you believe that, whether you're a Zionist, but to pretend you're a Zionist, if you're not Jewish, is just simply absurd by any standards. It's absurd. How could he say something like that?
Well, he's an old Etonian. And we know what the blooding ritual means in Eton. It's nothing to do with fox hunting or anything as exciting as that. The blooding is a more below the belt term. And Ian Fleming wrote about this, the creator and writer of James Bond wrote about this. Huxley wrote about this as well. These are all old Etonians that knew the score, and it's a closed shop to the likes of you and I, even with your education and your background, and me with being a Scotsman. They don't want me anywhere. Although Lord Boothby was a Scotsman, people can look into Lord Boothby and his activities, and Tom Dryburgh and Cecil King.
Tom Dryburgh. You didn't get more perverted than Tom Dryburgh, did you? No.
I think it's hard to top him. We'd have to get more information from the Mandelson files. It may well be there, but look, just in the last few minutes, if you don't mind, we're sort of trying to draw this to some sort of positive conclusion. And when you look at geopolitics, and you look at this dark web of making money and power and influence, like we're still buying oil technically from Russia, Godfrey, even though we're trying to say, as in Keir Starmer and all the warmongers, they want to back Ukraine, support Ukraine. But then we see that Starmer's over there trying to do deals with the Chinese. The CCP are opening a massive spy centre in London, in which there are plans that there's going to be 280 cells down there. Maybe I'll see you down there, Godfrey. Who knows? I hope you can play backgammon. But look, where do you see this going? Any kind of resistance that people can put up in a positive way, whether it be purchasing power, you go on about investments, how we should take our capital and out of the hands of the banking sector. Where do you really see this coming to a head in the next year or two?
All I can do, and I've said this on a number of occasions, Mark, is give practical advice, because otherwise I get people coming on to my channel on comments, and they say, "Oh, it's all very well, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What can we do? You're not spelling out what you can do." And I have a lot of sympathy with that view. So I'm now going to just give a few practicalities. And it's not voting for new parties. It's going to take us nowhere. We're beginning to see that. Except the truly holy faithful.
Thank God.
The people who actually believe that they know Nigel Farage intimately because they've seen him on telly. It used to happen to me when I was on telly a lot when I was in office. People would come up in a very nice way. A very nice way. They would imagine that they knew me because I'd been in their front room on their telly. And it's a natural phenomenon. And when I was a young man, I did it myself. You won't remember probably the great sports commentator, Peter West. I was on the touchline at Blackheath Rugby Club, where I was a member for a while. I was walking down the touchline. His son was playing in a junior game. And there was Peter West. It was a very famous TV personality and a very nice man, old school. And I sort of smiled at him, and he smiled at me. And I said, hello, and how are you? And because by the time I'd walked on, I sort of, Godfrey, you idiot, you don't know him. You've seen him on the telly, but he was so charming and nice. Yeah. And he was used to that kind of thing. Just because you see somebody on the TV doesn't mean to say you know them. You bloody well don't know them. He's just a face on the screen. Now, what can you do? What's the doing thing? Well, first of all, let's look to first principles. What we in the army used to call first principles. Make sure that you've got a really good food stash. Tons of food, tons of corned beef, tinned fruit, all the rest
of it.
Fray Bentos. Remember Fray Bentos. Well, they're going to pay me one day. So you've got all these things. You've got to really stack them up, have plenty of it. Okay, it's not, it's not gourmet food and it's not particularly good for you, but we're talking about not starving here. I'm lucky I have a small holding, so we grow our own vegetables. So we're very lucky in that regard. But most people aren't in that regard. So what you need to do, sort that out. As much as you can, and the old staples are good, tinned fruit, corned beef, so on and so forth. Get plenty of that for you and your family. That's point one, because without food in your tummy, you're hostage to all these bastards. So get the food situation sorted out. And I always say, and you'd agree with me on this, I'm quite sure, get some bottles of whiskey laid in as well, because it's good for what ails you.
Yes.
It's good for what ails you. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter what it is. Loads of Scotch whiskey.
Single malt whiskey.
Yeah, if you can afford it. But whiskey is whiskey. I don't mind as long as it gets you pissed. So that's what you need. And if you're a professional man watching this, it's quite possible that you are, and you have put a little bit of savings aside. And I've said this before. I'm going to say it again, and everybody can hear everybody groaning. Get your money in gold coin of the realm, sovereigns or Britannias. That's your first thing. That's your first thing. And if you're quite a wealthy man and you're dealing not in sort of tea caddies, and 15 grand's worth in the tea caddy, if you're a wealthy man, if you're talking about 50 even or 100,000 and above, your dealer, if he is an independent, reputable dealer, he will store it for you fully insured in Switzerland. And it's there. So when you need it, it's your reserve. And if you don't take my advice, take the advice of the Bank of International Settlements and all the major international banks in the world. What do you think they're doing? They're buying gold and they're stashing it. So why would you be different? What you don't do, which is what that idiot that gives financial advice on BBC is, Martin, somebody, it doesn't matter who he is, they'll put your money safe in the bank. Don't put it in the bank. It's a large bloody place to put it in the bank because they're all going down as well. And only last week a Chicago bank went down. It's just the beginning. So gold, small amounts in the tea caddy. Don't tell anybody you got it, particularly your wife. And make sure you're okay with big amounts. And I've had many an offer of a pint for people who took my advice a year or 2 years ago who've done very nicely. Thank you. So be sensible with money, real money. Only gold is real money. Get some tinned foods put aside and get your security sorted out, especially if you live in a town. We live deep in the country and the security isn't really a big issue permanently. But towns are always first thing to go wrong, where there's civil disobedience, so on and so forth, looting, all these things. Make sure you're not a victim. How you go about that, I'm certainly not going to tell you on here because I'll have a policeman come round and tell me I'm a very nasty man. But don't rely on the police. Any policeman listening, I'm sorry, mate. I'm not relying on you for the protection of my family. You can whistle Dixie. So they're the sort of doing things that we can do. And I think you can't do them soon enough. You can't. If you did, you see David Starkey's interview of the war studies professor? That was just a few days ago. David Starkey David Starkey, his show or something like that. He's actually talking to some very senior, well-informed people that think this ain't going to go to the next election, and you need to look to yourself. You need to look to yourself to look after your own family. So that's my advice. That's the doing thing at Ashridge Management course. They used to say, you just listen to the lecture. What's the doing thing?
Yeah, I love that. It is all about the doing thing and those that are able to execute the doing thing. And on your investment advice, you've spoken about this chapter and verse on ETFs. Could you just let our viewers and listeners just very quickly, know about the dangers of ETFs and especially in precious metals?
Yes, exchange traded funds. If you go to your bank or your financial advisor and say that you think gold would be a good idea, they'll say, yes, we'll give you an exchange traded fund, which actually links gold, your investment to the price of gold. So, for example, if you buy at $5,000 an ounce, and it goes to $6,000, you have a promissory note, and they'll give you 6,000 back. And that looks very good on the surface. Got to bear in mind, exchange traded funds don't actually have the gold. They have some gold, or if it's silver, they have some silver, but it's another form of fractional reserve banking, and you're dealing with counterparty risk. The whole point is owning gold is to avoid counterparty risk. So you have to have it in a greasy mitt. However, I understand that isn't always feasible. It isn't with me. It isn't with me because my family has so much of it that it has to be in a big lockup safe and not a bank. And it has to be in Switzerland where they have a history of that kind of looking up. And not all just in Switzerland, spread it around a little bit. Counterparty risk, you don't need counterparty risk. So, and coin of the realm, if you're a Brit, coin of the realm, because then it's capital gains tax free and it's VAT free and all the rest of it. So coin of the realm, it's got the Queen's head on, Queen Elizabeth II, or even this appalling man, King Charles III, his picture. If you can bear to look at him, that'll do as well.
Well, that's great advice, and it's you did. I'll just give a mention, an honourable mention in dispatches to Clive Thompson, who is one of your friends. A fantastic man and advisor like yourself on investments and metals, and he touched on ETFs and stop losses, that the recent collapse that we saw.
He did indeed,
and it was a great domino effect for all those people. Even I was getting text messages. I'm a layman in your wake, but I've been doing this a lot longer than some of my friends that watch the channel and followers, and they're all texting me saying, "What are you going to do? When are you going to sell?" I was like, "I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to sit back and watch you idiots get all, teetering on the brink. Calm down, listen to Clive, listen to Uncle Godfrey, relax yourselves, stand by your beds, don't do anything." And
nobody sold gold. Nobody sold gold. People sold paper. And we used to have a phrase in the old days in the city called a dead cat bounce. Yes. It was it doesn't matter how far a thing crashes, it will always bounce to a certain extent. And that's what I said. If you threw a dead cat off the top of the GPO tower, or whatever it was, a tall building of those days, it would actually bounce. This was the most obvious case of a dead cat bounce I ever saw in my career, and I started in 1967. It was bound to bounce because nobody had actually really sold any gold. They'd sold paper. Yeah. And I'll say something else. I don't like to stick my neck out too much on these things, but when you get that kind of correction, whether it's stocks or whether it's precious metals, whatever it is, generally speaking, historically, it will bounce. And if the price of gold today is something like £3,900 an ounce, which I think it probably is, in or thereabouts, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to go on and on because the currency is being degraded. Having said that, I have to be pragmatic with you. That when you go into your pub and, as you would say, ask for a pint of heavy, it will be £25, or if not more, because it's a degradation of money, not the increase in gold. And if you don't haul anything else in from this interview that we've done, haul in, it's paper money's collapsing, only gold is real money.
JP Morgan.
1912.
And he knew his stuff. And just on the final note, it's funny because we're coming back to the beginning again, full circle, and Peter Mandelson's involvement with Gordon Brown and his advice to sell the gold. Because as we know, the Brown's gold or the brown gold or whatever that period, I mean, some of us made hay. I might be looking at someone that did very well out of that. I don't know. I'm not going to assume that you were on that like shit off a shovel. But
Oh, bloody well was.
you were, and salute you for it, sir. Gold on average between that period in 1999 to 2001, 2002 was sold at an average of $175 an ounce. I mean, and look at today. Today we'll do a quick market update. I think you're talking about gold's back up to 5,100. And people are going to ask questions about that whole affair for a long time.
I'm going to feed this into the channel here because somebody asked me when I was out in Barbados last week, one of my subscribers.
Yes, sir.
And she said, what was all that about? Because he telegraphed it. He didn't put it to auction, if you remember the British gold. He said he was going to sell it next week. Now, if you do that, of course, quite obviously, you suppress the price. The price goes down. And it went down very considerably. And he drove the price down because he was going to do that. That was quite deliberate. Now, why would he drive the price down? Well, I would counsel, have a look, do some homework and find if any of his members of his family worked for a bullion bank. And you will be very surprised to find what you find.
It did. I mean, half of our reserves were sold. 375 tons or whatever it was. Half of our gold revenue went. And yes, follow the money, as you correctly said, Godfrey. Follow the money. But look, all we can do now, this has been a fantastic interview. We've covered so much, as we always do, sir. But all that remains for me to do is to salute you and say thank God that you are still as active as ever and as healthy looking, if you don't mind me saying, than ever. And you've got more fire in your belly and more passion than the whole of the House of Commons. If we could encapsulate it in one man, maybe as some people say, the greatest prime minister we never had. If you don't mind me saying, get your head through the room at the end. But listen, Godfrey, thank you so much for coming back on to Herd Immunity News. God bless you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.